Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to EFA188, where today I want to talk about my follow-up to EFA187 with the conversation that I had with Honorable Mr. Poilievre, a member of Carleton here for all Canadians. I also want to talk about programs, which I wholeheartedly believe in, and my LISP, if anybody's ever noticed my LISP. And I want to get into that. First and foremost, Mr. Poilievre, thank you very much. Thank you so much on behalf of Canadians on not only being part of this conversation, but how you opened up on the conversation on the front that that's what I love to bring out in people, and I love to have, and those that have it, which I knew Mr. Poilievre had that, when he started talking organically about his mother and those kind of things, which we're going to get into. Thank you for that. But my welcome. When I looked at the podcast, I'm very critical of myself, which I should be, and it's very good to be critical of yourselves. When I look at it again, how I do this again, it's the intro, my intro, how I got, because we had a conversation before, and then what transpired is that our schedule got tweaked a bit, we adjusted, we made it work, obviously. And out of it, in my introduction, I forgot to welcome him in the sense of welcome to EFA, and that kind of stuff, and get that started first. So if I was to do it again, there was that. There's a couple of points in there where there's a couple of questions that would have had more time, right? But so that whole condensing and a few things and talking, and there's few ingredients that I would change. However, we're going to talk about the ingredients of that podcast and why that's so important with some of the things he said. But I also want to talk, before I'm going to get into that, let me get into the ingredients of Mr. Poilievre, then I'll get into the programs, which we're going to talk about, which is, I wholeheartedly believe in programs, because I know they work. And I know they work when they're done properly, because I've experienced it, I've lived it, I've walked through those shoes, right? So we're going to talk about that. But that came from the podcast, Mr. Poilievre, right? So how money works. When he got into the conversation, how money really works, how our money, how the government has no money. The government works with our money, right? So they have no money. If government wasn't there, there's nothing in the pot, right? The money comes from the people, and that money, how we explain, they take that money and they give you a bit back of the money you give them, right? And when you got into that, you got into the granular of it. And when you listen and you sit back and you listen how it really explains it, it opens up a lot of eyes to a lot of individuals, right? Because this is coming from a very, very versed individual that's explaining it in the sense that I love to bring things together like that on EFA and explain it to me organically. Explain it to me from a view we were sitting around the table, right? Let's go to that kind of conversation. If we had a coffee in our hand, right, and it's going to be backed by data and research and that kind of stuff, let's go into those details. That's what I loved about that conversation when he started talking about how money works, the roles of public servants. When he talked about a minister, what does a minister mean, right? Public servant, the intent of government. When he talked about the intent of government, when he got into how government was created and why it was created, and he started talking about the kings and so forth, right? And how things are supposed to work, right? And how they basically the org chart is upside down, how they put themselves on top when the people should be on top. And he explains that in a grassroots kind of way that you sit back and you really want to have another cup of coffee and just listen, right? Just listen. And then the 800-year-old tradition, when we talked about that carte blanche moment in March, where we could have had been in a situation right now where our federal liberals right now would have had full control of everything financial on us till 2022 for 2 years, if they wouldn't have picked up on that. And that's an 800-year-old tradition they tried to break. And this is why when you look at things that are put in place, when you look at a corporation, when you look at a mission statement, when you look at your foundation of what you built and why you built it, you change and tweak and pivot throughout the years, but you maintain that structure, right? That's what built the company strong, right? So what builds a country is the same thing. And if you're going to go and break an 800-year-old tradition at the flick of a pen because of a situation like COVID, think about that for a second, right? You're taking advantage of a situation for what, right? For what? To have full control, to break an 800-year-old tradition, really? Think about that for a second. That was powerful in itself when you listen to the ingredients of the podcast, right? When he said he's a simple boy from the prairies, absolutely love that. I love when he said he was a simple boy from the prairies and he got into it, and how he was like a prosecutor and the crown attorney inside when he's doing his job, when he talked about it, doing his job for the people, and the simple prairie boy from the prairies that used to come in late and his mother would be on him and asking him specific and direct questions, and that's where his answer to the question came from. When he goes after the facts, when he does his research and his team, and they put things together and they, okay, look at this. So answer the question, right? When he started going through the blank documents of the 5,000 pages and so many thousand were blanked out and etc. I don't want to get into the numbers on how many were blacked out, but we all saw it, how those pages were blacked out, right? You might as well took a paint roller and rolled them all, right? Here you go. Here's several thousand sheets rolled with a black paint roller, right? It doesn't make sense, but here you go, right? So when you look at that, it's sad, but it's not funny, right? And I'm laughing, man. I'm going like, are you kidding me right now? And like I said, it's not a matter of national security here. It's the We campaign. That said, when he said that about the prairie boy from the prairies and it talked about his mother and all that, it was very organic. It was very, you like I said, the cup of coffee, right? You want to sit back, and those that don't drink coffee, you want your cup of water, you want your cup of something, right? You want something to just listen to, understand, and pay attention to what he was saying. So those were really cool ingredients in there. And I got an opportunity, we talked about programs, I told him about the recidivism rate, because I saw institutions. I've worked in assessment units, in treatment centers, in correctional facilities, in detention centers, the boots on the ground, the people that take care of your human inventory in life, right? When you look at the industries, you look at commodities, and you look at the toilet paper. If you look at the toilet paper, like in March, everybody we have enough toilet paper in Canada, right? We live in a pulp type world, like soft trees and so forth. So we don't have an issue with toilet paper in Canada, but yet people need to go and grab 2 or 3 months supply. That's starting again, right? So that's inventory. So imagine dealing with that kind of inventory and those kind of headaches and that kind of stuff in the world, but deal with it with human beings. And that's the world that I walk those shoes, right? And those that deal with human beings, and your nurses and your doctors and your institutions, and from criminal institutions, from health institutions and so forth, I can keep going on. But when you're dealing with human inventory, it's a completely different ballgame. And that's why programs are important. And programs are important outside in the community also. And if money is not well spent, those programs disappear and dissipate. And this is where, when I look at a lot of individuals that have children with autism and so forth, and when I speak to them and they're frustrated because every little thing that they get a phone call from the school board, come pick up your child, come pick up your child, come pick up your child. My LISP, oven cleaner, okay? When I was a child, and that picture you just saw there, that was me on my father's lap. And I was at the hospital. Why? Because I drank oven cleaner. As a child, I drank oven cleaner. My mother, there's different versions of it when you listen to my sister, but basically my mother was cleaning an oven, and then I drank oven cleaner, and basically poisoned my mouth, burnt my mouth, burnt my tongue, my throat passage, so forth. And ended up in a hospital, right? They said I almost died, obviously. You're drinking the oven cleaner. And I wrote Obelix. Those that know Astérix and Obelix, I think they were French books, les Gaulois. They were French books, but I think it was written from somebody in France. I can't remember his name, but I could just see it in the book right now. Great books. And Obelix had drank this magic potion when he was a child. That was me. Wrong potion. I took the oven cleaner instead. So that developed to a lisp when I was young. And I don't even know, I never even, and I have a really good imagination, so I never saw myself as having it. If you look at it, a disability in the sense. And it's like people that come from the hood, or people that come from different upbringings and so forth, and they hit an age and they realize things, right? Because when I was a child growing up, you don't see that you're in the hood. You don't see that, right? Because I had a good family, and this is what that's the prairie from the prairie boys, right? The simple boy from the prairie. I was that simple boy also from the hood, and with a good family. Right? A good family, a good foundation, fragmented at times like everybody else's family throughout life, right? At times, but strong, right? A strong net, right? You fall in it, there might be holes in the net, but it's a strong net. It's a safety net, right? So I had that growing up. And so therefore you never saw yourself, when you look back, and I was raised there. I'd love to walk through. I will. I will go door knocking one day and walk through that house, right? And walk through those homes that I grew up in Liberty and Overbrook. And I look back at that. But that right there, those programs and that list, when I burnt myself and I burnt my mouth and that kind of stuff, those programs were in school. Those programs, I remember getting pulled out of the class every now and then. I'd go to this room and with this lady, and she would work on speech. She would work on speech, on syllables, on pronunciations, etc. and so forth. And I remember I had this jumpsuit one day, the old painter's pants that I used to go up there, and on there it said rebel on one, and she had asked me if I was a rebel. And am I a rebel? What do you mean? I was a rebel. I was a French kid, right? What's a rebel? I said, "Why rebel?" It was. I got into that conversation with her, and she was teaching me things about my LISP, that kind of stuff, but also going into life skills, right? And that came from that program that was part of the school. Right, and I'm not versed enough to speak on all the programs and all the schools and so forth. I wish I won't. And I know there is programs out there, but I know that there is missing programs, and that's why I talked to Monsieur Poilievre about an efficient government. An efficient government is so important, because an efficient government, which is the people's money, always remember that, right? An efficient government, you would have programs, a lot more of them. Right, and they would be statically in place. You wouldn't change. You would grow from it, like a strong foundation, like building. Right, the strong. And I talked about how when you're building something, that you don't change 800-year-old traditions. When you put good programs in place, you keep them in place. Right, you keep them in place, and you grow from them. And there's a lot of good programs out there, which I'm a product of that program. Right, when I look back, like. I didn't realize that, but when I look back, right, and that's why sometimes I'll catch it in my speech, right? Like I pick up the French sometimes in my language. Some people will tell me, you speak French? Like I don't hear it, but you'll pick it up sometimes. You'll pick up a lot of times, sometimes depending on the moment. But I pick up on my lisp sometimes, and even my tongue, the way it moves and that. But that's something that was worked on through programs as a child, right? And that's why I believe in programs. And I talked about the people, when he got down to the stories about Churchill, and when he talked about that woman, and I got an opportunity to speak about women, which I'm a strong advocate for. And there's a lot of good programs out there, because I was speaking with my sister actually yesterday on that, and one of the comments she said, because women, when you invest in women, they invest also. They go back to the children, the family, the nest, right? So when you have a community, when you have a country that, and I've said this on my podcast, and I tell this to my daughter, you want to be part of a nation that respect women. When they do, you have a strong democratic society. The same thing applies to programs. When you involve programs that involve women, that rebuild them, because there's parts of this world that is like absolutely disgusting what they do to women, right? Through wars and so forth, right? And there's people that go in and save them, right? And give them programs and give them education and give them skills, because these women take it right back to their families, and they give it back and they teach it, right? So that's why programs like we got to talk about women and that kind of stuff, because there's a good path when you follow those shoes, right? When you step into those shoes, you start walking that path, it's a good path, because there is light all the way through. And that's why I say I love strong-driven women. The strong-driven women are what is needed to have a good blended. My audience, it's 52-48, 50-50, right? I love that. I love having that balance, right? Because that's where the message gets communicated properly. So in closing, when I look at programs and the organic moment that we got through as the ingredients of the podcast. When I look at the ingredients of the podcast, they were powerful. So thank you, Monsieur Poilievre, Pierre. I wanted to talk French at part of it too, and a few my questions at the end, but we made it work. But what came out of it were very strong ingredients that made for a very, when you eat something for the first time you never had, and you make it well, right? You eat it and go, wow, that was good, right? That was the ingredients in the podcast. So thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Those that believe in programs, Please continue supporting those that believe in an efficient government, those that believe in wellness. When you look at community, when you look at family, when you look at social, when you look at sports, when you look at financial, you look at everything in life, right? When you look at wellness, I look at everything, right? The whole encompassing part of wellness. GuyPublicFigure, EFA188. Please continue to support me. Equality for all is for each and every one of us. Thank you. Merci. Gracias. Grazie. And if I knew how to say it in any other language, I would. Thank you.